As you know, it's been about 6 weeks since that attack. How are you doing physically and how are you doing mentally at this point?
Physically, I have been recovering pretty well. At this point, I still have to um, go through a lot of the physical therapy, occupational therapy, as far as I'm bedridden. I'm unable to put any weight on any of my limbs yet. I have a doctor's appointment at the end of this month, in which hopefully they'll tell me that I can start putting some weight at least on my legs. My legs are doing much better than my arms. I'll show you. My arms still have these external fixators on them, um, and yeah. So physically, I'm doing pretty well. I'm recovering well. Mentally, it's a struggle. The first couple of weeks were definitely the hardest. Uh, I still struggle mostly with sleep. I manage to distract myself while I'm awake, but I think it's one of the things that a lot of us do. We distract ourselves while we're awake, and then when you when you try to sleep at nighttime, that's when everything comes just floating through the mind, and yeah, it's a struggle. But I am seeing a therapist here. I have been doing talk therapy, which I always find very important. I always recommend to everybody. It's done a lot of good for me in the past. When I came home, and it's doing some. I'm progressing right now mentally.
So then what is your long-term prognosis and what sort of a timetable are you expecting?
Physically, they haven't really told me a whole lot as far as the timetable. I think that they don't want to get my hopes up, you know.
Mm.
Uh, but I should be able to walk hopefully pretty quickly. My legs have been getting pretty strong with the physical therapy that I am able to do while I'm in bed. Uh, the main concern is for my hands. My fingers, I am still unable to move. I can get a little bit of a wiggle out of one or two of my fingers, my left hand, but unfortunately, there was so much damage done to the nerves and tendons in my wrists, and there's a lot of nerve damage done that they believe that my hands should function, but not 100% in the future.
Mm. What do you remember about the attack? And again, only if you're comfortable discussing it.
Yeah. So I'll tell you that the individual who did this, he was somebody who wasn't a regular at the shelter that I worked at, but he was somebody who had been there. So it was a face I recognized, somebody I'd never had an interaction with before. And so it was around lunchtime. He came in and he went up to the counter where, he went to get the lunch, and he asked what was for lunch. Simple thing, but the guy who was serving it was like, "Oh, it's written on the board. You can see it there." And he got upset about that, and he said, "Oh, well, it's written in the book for you, White Devil." And my coworkers and I were sitting at a table right next to the counter, basically, and we were just kind of like, "Whoa, you can't be talking like that in here." And he tried to play it off like he didn't say anything, that he didn't use the term white devil. And we were all kind of like, no, we heard you. And, we just want you to be more respectful. And so he grabs his lunch, he goes, he sits down, and he seems all right for a minute or two. But then he starts kind of talking to himself. I think a lot of us, we get into that negative self talk, and we get upset about a situation. And so he starts talking more aggressively out loud, and then he starts talking about white devils. And so again, we're all just kind of like, hey, like, relax, man. Please don't use that type of language in here. We try to have as positive as atmosphere as possible. And so we give him a few chances like that to calm down. But eventually he just like starts lashing out a little bit at us, and he calls me white devil and everything. And I'm just kind of like, all right, I see that this is just going to keep progressing. We tried to de-escalate the situation. We tried to give him chances to calm down and relax. He's going to be a continuous issue. So I went to the upstairs area where my boss was, and I spoke with him and just said, "Hey, we're having this situation. I think this person needs to leave for the day." And my boss says, "Yeah, no problem. He's going to call the police just in case, because sometimes when we have people acting up, we like to make sure that the police are notified and that they can come and assist us with removing somebody from the property." So I go back downstairs and I let him know. I said, "Hey, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to leave for the day. If you want, you can finish up your lunch real quick, but you're going to have to leave." And he's just kind of like, he starts to act real calm. He's kind of like, "All right, yeah, okay." Uh, and then he says, "Hey, can I just grab my property too? Because we have some gym lockers in the shelter." And I'm like, "Yeah." I tell him, "Yeah, sure. I mean, it's your property. Of course you can go and grab it. You just have to leave." And so he goes into the locker room area, and I go and I sit back down at the table with my other coworkers. And my boss ends up coming down, and he's just kind of like, "Hey, where's this guy at?" And we're kind of like, "Oh, he's over in the locker room." So my boss goes over there to make sure that he's getting his stuff and he's getting ready to leave. Uh, and that's when my boss ends up screaming out, "Watch out!" And I look up and I see him, and he's at first he's just kind of walking, and I see he has something in both hands, but it didn't register in my mind what he had. And honestly, he starts running at me, and he says something about "you fucking white devil," and I black out. Like, I don't really remember the next couple of seconds. The next thing I remember, I'm running up the stairs and I fall. And so I'm kind of like towards the top of the stairs, and I look down and he's right there behind me. And I start kind of like kicking at him because he has swords in both of his hands. And so I'm just kicking at him, and he just starts slashing at my legs. And my legs literally start to just fall apart. Um, but I do everything I can to kick at him. And, he just keeps going and going. Um, Thankfully, my body went into shock. I don't really remember any pain, but then I start to black out. And apparently, he had then he had turned around and left the area. Uh, he stayed within the building, but he went back into the cafeteria area, and then we're not sure where he went. He went into somewhere, but I had pretty much blacked out. My coworkers they had been right there. They had witnessed everything. They were screaming at him. There was people that wanted to intervene, but of course they're in fear of their own lives, and I don't blame them for that. But so when he had walked away, they're with me. They're trying to take care of me. They're telling me to wake up. They're trying to talk to me and tell me to stay conscious, stay awake. And I kind of come in and out of consciousness, but eventually I hear screams, and he comes back, and he's telling my coworkers to get out of the way, and they're like, "No, no, no." And eventually he's standing over me, and I remember looking up at him, and I that's when I put up my arms, and he starts swinging, and he's like swinging like right at my head. Um, and again, now it's my arms that start to fall apart. Um, and he did manage, like, the sword, one of them bounced off of my arm, and it did hit me. I don't know if you can see, but thankfully the scars healed up pretty well. He did hit me in the face. He hit me in the top of the head. But again, thankfully it was after the sword had deflected off of my arm. And
Do
yeah,
you believe
he's
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
No, no,
do you believe the root of Mason's actions were evil or mental illness?
I I don't really know him, so I don't know enough of his mental state. I don't believe in necessarily like I don't believe that people are pure evil. I'm not somebody who believes that somebody is, um, just evil, and uh, I don't believe that he's walked around his whole life an evil person. I don't know what has brought him to this point in his life, but yeah,
Do you think
you know,
society failed him?
do I think society failed him? I think that there are a lot of resources to help people. We always need more resources, though. I will say that we need more resources to help people in every way. Whether he's mentally ill, again, I don't know. We need more resources for those who are suffering from mental illness. We need more resources for those who are homeless. They do exist, but we always need more.
Yeah. Well, clearly you were able to find redemption in your own life. Do you believe Mason will have that opportunity? Does he deserve that chance?
Yeah, I believe that everybody deserves a chance at turning their life around. I believe that we should be um, reforming our idea of what should happen to somebody after they've committed a horrible crime. There are some people who deserve to be in prison for the rest of their lives. But even if somebody's spending the rest of their lives in prison, I believe that they should have an opportunity to turn their life around while serving out their time in prison, while serving their life in prison. Um, I believe that, you know, sooner or later, I'm sure he will be released from prison. 95% of people who end up in prison are released from prison. So he should have the resources while serving his time to look in within himself and be able to deal with whatever issues he has that brought him to this point in his life where he was able to do this. And so then when he comes home, that he does have the ability to be a more successful individual and a more well-rounded, healthy person who can interact in society in a way which he'll never do anything like this.
John, many years ago, do you remember the letter you wrote to the Times Union while you were at Clinton Correctional?
I do. You mean Kiksaki Correctional?
Was it Kiksaki? Okay, well,
Yeah.
so you remember the letter, and I did a little research. You wrote what happened at Columbia High School was the worst mistake you ever made, and the advice you gave in that letter was that suicide or homicide is a permanent answer to a temporary problem, and you urged people to talk to someone, to talk to a therapist or a priest or some other religious leader. Um, did people respond to that letter, and do you have reason to believe that your words saved people's lives?
Well, that's a powerful statement. Um, I would say that I believe I want to draw attention to mental health.
Mm.
I don't believe that mental health alone is to blame for violent tragedies that we see all too often. But I do believe that it's a piece in the puzzle that should be addressed more often in our society. And it's something that I I truly believe that more people than not want to see more mental health resources, more attention drawn to this issue. And it could not only prevent more tragedies as far as mass shootings or any type of, um, any of the violence that we see can be addressed not only by the mental health, but also when we talk about mental health, we have an overwhelming amount of people losing their lives to drug overdoses and suicide. So if we talk about mental health, if we end the stigma against mental health, we can save numerous lives. So in that letter, when I spoke about these things, it's not just about one area of the tragedies that we see, but the numerous areas that we see. And since that letter, we've had COVID and the pandemic, and with the lockdowns, the teenagers, the adolescents that we have growing up in this era of lockdowns and COVID, they're going through some mental anguish that none of us can imagine. So, what can we do to best help them so that they can cope with the duress that they are going through, and so that they can be more mentally aware, more mentally just uh, they're going to need a lot of coping skills. And if we can help them cope with everything that's going on within them, then we can prevent so many people from losing their lives in all different forms.
Given the eloquence with which you speak, I'm going to assume that when you recover, you probably plan to continue your advocacy for the homeless and the mentally ill individuals.
I would love to. You know, some people have asked me about, like, how do I feel about going back to work with the homeless? And I'll say that, is it a scary thought? Yes. Is it something that I want to power through and still do? Yes. Because I enjoyed it. There were so many people that I met and was able to interact with and help. And they're good people who have gone through hard times in their lives, and they need help getting back on their feet. I'm lucky enough to have resources. I'm lucky enough to have a family who can financially support me and help me get back on my feet when I needed it. So many people don't have that. So many people don't have that safety net to catch them when they fall. I did. So I now want to be there for those who don't have that safety net. I want to be a part of their safety net to help them get back on their feet. So whether it's homelessness or mental illness, I want to be able to be there and allow people the opportunity to get their lives together.
Those words were very beautifully spoken. I think what we're not talking about right now is that wonderful shirt you have on. Now, you're not old enough to remember the $6 million man, are you?
No, this shirt, I'll try to
Yeah, let
show
me
it
get a better
all,
look at that.
get a better look. My mom got me this shirt.
That was
She
that
thought
was one of my favorite shows when I was a kid.
my mom got me this shirt. She thought it was fitting for the situation of what I'm going through. So, you know, better, stronger, faster. So that's that's what we're aiming for.